Hello, it's Ann Katzoff of Ask Design. Welcome. Today's tutorial is layout and design with the grid block. The WordPress grid block is a variation of the group block. Blocks are arranged inside a flexible grid container. In this tutorial, we'll explore how to use the grid block for advanced layout and design on your site. The grid block offers two layout options called the grid item position. The two options are auto and manual, accessed in the sidebar settings. Off to the right here, the sidebar settings, auto and manual. Auto with the minimum column width of 12 rem is the default setting. It generates the grid automatically based on a default 12 rem minimum column width. Change the measurement and you'll see how the rows and columns change. This is a responsive setting that works seamlessly on mobile. The other grid item position option is manual. It gives you a default of 3 columns, and you can change this by specifying the number of columns you actually want. So we'll take it down to 2 or maybe even 1, which is not something that you would actually want, 6, etc. And it gives you a different kind of control over the layout, yet these columns are retained on mobile at this point in the development of this block. It's not responsive like the auto option, and I'm hoping that WordPress developers work on a solution. In the meantime, if you do want to use the columns option, you can add some media queries to a style sheet or to the additional CSS in the full site editor to change the widths at different breakpoints. You can add a grid block to begin a new section. Then other blocks can be added and or moved to it. We have several options for adding blocks. You can type a backslash and it might show up on this abbreviated list. Here it is right there. Or if not, type a G. It might start to show up as you type in the letters. You can also click on the inserter button, the plus sign. You'll get another abbreviated list. If it's not there, click on Browse All and scroll until you find it, or it's usually under Design, there it is, or you can search for it. Here it is. And you can always go directly to the block inserter area off to the left here, this plus sign. Open that same list up, scroll until you see it in the design section, or make your life easy and just type it in. You can insert a group block anytime you like, but for the purposes of comparison, we'll begin with a group block and then transform it to a grid block. I've got the group block set up below. I've got my list view open, so it makes things easier to see the construction of the section here. And inside that group, we've got a heading, 2 paragraph blocks, and 1 image block. So if I go back to my list view and select the parent group, I can go up into my nav area and transform it that way to a grid, or I can go into my settings sidebar and transform it to a grid here. The initial results use the default auto setting with a 12 rem minimum column width, and the blue background is retained. If you take that same grid and just change the minimum column width in the sidebar, settings sidebar to 12 rem. You get this result. And now let's switch to the manual grid item. We've gone from auto to manual with that 3-column default, and this is what happens. Both the auto and manual layout settings provide the opportunity for each child block inside the parent grid to span over multiple columns and rows. So let's give it a try. Let's go into our grid and look into the sidebar settings here. We've got the padding. And let's select the heading block. We're still in the sidebar settings. I've exaggerated the headline to make a point, just to span the number of columns to 3. And for each of the paragraphs, I'm spanning to 2 columns. So I'm widening from 1 column to 2. And you can drag it that way or use the settings sidebar for changing the column span and the row span. And here for the image, we did the same thing. For some of the blocks, like images, you may have to open up the Styles tab to view those column and row spans. We've just been showing all of these blocks spanning multiple columns. You could just as easily have them span rows. And the nodule technique is interesting because you don't have to go to the actual end of that column or row. It will snap to the closest one. So I kind of like that. Adding the grid block to your toolbox increases the layout and design options for your website. We'll explore some of the ways to combine the grid block with the group block and its other variations. You can mix and match and come up with some interesting designs and layouts. So our first example is a stack block inside the grid. And I like to keep my list view open to show you what I'm talking about here. So here's the grid. And the first item inside that grid is a stack block containing a head, a subhead, and this is all really a paragraph. Then we have the other paragraphs that we have been using all along and the image block. So it's just one way to add visual interest. Let's go to example 2. Up to this point, we've been going with the default width of the grid block, which equals the content width of the theme. When you select the grid block and hover over a line in the toolbar, click on that, you'll see the options of none, wide, and full. None is actually the content width of the theme, and wide is also established along with the content width in your global settings. For our next example, we'll add a group block to the scene. By using a group block, we are able to change that default width in the sidebar settings. And for this example, we'll change it to 600. So let's go to, let me see, I've got the group here. I've added the same grid to a group. And now when we open up our sidebar settings, inner blocks will use the content width, and we've changed it to 600. That's why we have all this space on the left and right sides. Now, when we select that group, go up to the align, we still see those 3 options, but the grid itself has changed to the maximum of 600 pixels wide. Let's move on to example number 3. You may have noticed in example 2 that the images are different sizes and do not align on the bottom. To adjust this, we'll make use of several stack block features. First, we'll pair each paragraph. So paragraph 1 and one image are paired in a separate stack, and then in another stack is paragraph 2 and the salmon hibiscus. We then select the left side stack with paragraph 1 and its image and head over to the settings sidebar, the Styles tab, scroll down. Underneath the column and row span, you can set a minimum height. We'll use 530 pixels for this, and then the next stack, same thing. Go to the Styles tab and 530. Okay. The next thing we'll do is go back to the left side stack, and let me see. We'll change the vertical alignment. Make sure you've got space between for that stack as well as the stack in the right-hand column with paragraph 2. So that pushes the items in that stack block, it separates them and forces the images to bottom align. One last thing I'd like to point out in the layout of this particular group, we've got the group with the 600 content width going on, and then the grid, I'm clicking on the grid. I want to point out that this here, this group of items is grouped together in a stack block, and the button block goes into the next grid item. And I've pushed that to justify right. That's how we get this to align on the right, and that is on the left. And now for styling the grid and its child blocks. You can apply certain shared attributes to the entire group. In all of our examples, the grid block or the group block that contains the grid block has a light blue color applied to it. And I've also added some padding on all 4 sides, so we have a little bit of elbow space and things don't hit the edge of the block. I simply selected the grid block and went to the Styles tab and applied blue, but in this case I've got the group block selected, and that's what I've styled here with the background color of blue. Now here, let's see what happened, because I did change the background to white. You can change it to other colors, of course, but for our example, we've got it at white. And then the child blocks inside the grid can be styled individually. So this heading and the subhead are both using like a tealish blue. The button, let's open that up. The button itself, if I go to the Style tab, I've added a background of hot purple or pink. And then I've also changed the typography to be uppercase. So those are just a few things that you can do to snazz things up in your design and layout. And that, my friends, is the conclusion of our tutorial today. If you have any questions, drop them into the comments below. And certainly, I'm open to feedback as well. So if you've discovered different ways to use the grid block, please let me know, and we'll all share and learn together. Thanks for your time. Have a great afternoon.